At the beginning of my junior year of high school, I remember the excitement of those first few days. New classes, new books, new opportunities. I wasn't sure what was in store for me, but I remember the thrill of those first few days of AP English Language and Composition, the class I was most excited to take. I remember those early days in class, hearing my AP teacher, Mrs. P, tell us we would be discovering our voices and wondering what exactly she meant. My voice? Didn't I already have a voice? What was there to discover? I was immediately confronted with an idea that would not only propel my efforts that year in AP English, but which would ignite my passion for writing. I wanted to swim around in streams of words, crafting vivid images, traveling to far-off regions of my imagination, showing readers what crazy thoughts were bouncing around my brain, communicating myself to the world. But first, as Mrs. P instructed, I needed to find my writer's voice. The problem? I wasn't quite sure what she meant by writer's voice. We all have voices. Vocal cords that produce vibrations, tongue, teeth, lips, nose, lungs, all the things that make human sound and speech possible. And even if we don't have the physical tools, we all have thoughts, opinions, things we want to say. Is that what my teacher meant by writer's voice? I waited for further instruction. For the next few months, Mrs. P gave us a taste of writer's voice. We read essays by strong writers who exploded my notion of what writing could be. These were words that danced. Words that shimmered like desert mirages. Words that intoxicated. Reading these writers, I felt like they were in the room with me. Was this what Mrs. P meant by writer's voice? The writer's notebook was the first tool Mrs. P introduced to us to help us find our voices. I know some of my classmates didn't take it seriously, or they weren't sure what to write in it. But for me, the notebook was an indescribable gift. While everyone else was simply doing the assignments in their notebooks, I was living in mine. I wrote down everything. I wrote in my notebook even when there was no assignment. I wrote in it because suddenly I realized that I wanted to make my every thought, my every experience, permanent. By the act of writing, I became more of myself. Was this what Mrs. P meant by writer's voice? Soon we started doing these things called copy changes, where we would imitate a particular writer's style, her particular voice, using her syntax and rhetorical devices, but with our own original ideas. The weird thing is, I felt like more of a writer when I was copying someone else's style. It was like I was wearing a mask or using some kind of artificial limb, but it felt totally my own. I started noticing how even when I wasn't copy changing, I was using all these styles and techniques. I wasn't just imitating or stealing. They were part of me now. The various masks, the dozens of artificial limbs, had suddenly become my own face, my own arms and legs and feet and hands. By imitating a bunch of other writers, I had somehow transformed myself. I sounded different, more artful, more fluid, more vivid, but I was still me. Was this what Mrs. P meant by writer's voice? By the end of the year, after countless essays, rewrites, editing sessions, portfolios, reflections, and AP practice essays, I knew I had become a better writer. I could feel it and hear it in my work. AP 11 had been transformative, but in a gradual, almost imperceptible way. It wasn't one flashing moment. It wasn't one particular lesson. It was a process, an evolution. Writer's voice wasn't a thing outside myself that I had to learn. It was something inside myself I had learned to let out. I ended the year having discovered that I had something to say, and that I had a way to say it that was all my own. I also ended the year knowing what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I wanted to be a writer. In discovering my writer's voice, I had also discovered my future.